Hello everybody. Welcome again to Storytime from the Milledgeville Public Library of Illinois. The story we have for you today comes from Wales, and it is a very, very old story. This is the story of one prince and another prince who became very good friends. This is the story of Pwyll Pen Annwfn. Once, a very, very long time ago, there was a prince named Pwyll. Now, Pwyll was the prince of Dyfed. That's a lot of what is now southern Wales. There were many cantrefs, and they all paid homage to Pwyll. Now, Pwyll, he was a fairly good prince, and he ruled his kingdom as best he knew how. But sometimes he wasn't exactly as good of a prince as he could be. And he tried to be better, but he didn't always know how. Well, one day, Pwyll decided that he wanted to go out, and he wanted to go hunting. His favorite place to go hunting was an area in his country called Glen Cwch. And so he decided he was going to go to Glen Cwch, and he was going to go hunting. And so he took all his hunting dogs, and all of his huntsmen, and all of the people, the men of his court who wanted to go hunting with him, and they went out to Glen Cwch. And Pwyll blew his hunting horn, and off they rode into the forest looking for a stag to hunt down. Now, hunts can be very, very, confusing sometimes. You have to ride through the forest and follow the dogs as they're barking and yowling and yelling and howling and yelping as they're running. And dogs generally tend to run just a little bit faster than horses through the forest because there are trees and there are bushes and there are things that the horses have to jump over that the dogs can just run under and things like that. Well, the long and the short of it is that when you go hunting together, it's really not easy for everyone to stay together. And this time proved no different. For indeed, Pwyll and the dogs soon lost sight of the rest of the huntsmen in the party. And so it was just Pwyll following the dogs through Glen Cwch as they rode through the forest trying to find a stag. Well, before too long, Pwyll started to think that he was hearing an echo. For he could hear his dogs yelping, and then he could hear what sounded like other dogs yelping. And then he realized it wasn't an echo at all, for the sound was not staying the same distance away or changing its direction. It was just in front of him, and it was getting closer. Well, as he rode through the forest following his own dogs who were yelping and barking and running, he could see up ahead that there was a lighter spot in the trees. There was a clearing up there, and as the dogs ran toward it, Pwyll went as well, following behind them on his horse. And just as he got into the clearing, he saw a magnificent stag right in the middle of the clearing. But he also saw another group of hunting dogs. Now, Pwyll's hunting dogs looked like most hunting dogs. Some were gray and some were brown and some were black and some had a few spots on them, but they did look like normal dogs. These other dogs, they looked very, very different. Their coats, their fur was so white, it almost sparkled. And their ears, they were red. And their eyes were red too. And so red that they too almost seemed to glitter in the sunlight. Well, just as Pwyll came into the glen, into the clearing with his dogs, the other pack of dogs leaped upon the stag and they brought it down to the ground. And they began to eat, for they were hungry, for they'd been running for so long. Well, Pwyll looked around and he did not see anyone else with this strange-looking pack of dogs. And so he rushed towards them and he scared them away from the stag. And he let his own dogs start to eat the stag. Now, that was not very nice. For the other dogs had been the ones to take down the stag. And sure enough, a few minutes later, Pwyll found out just how bad of an idea that had been. For a few moments later, another horseman rode into the clearing. and he was wearing hunting clothes of olive gray. And he had a horn at his side and a sword at his other side. And he looked at Pwyll and he said, "Chieftain, you have done me a disservice." "I have done you a disservice? I am sorry," said Pwyll. "I do not know who you are. I don't know how I could have done something wrong." And the other looked at him and said, "It is not kind, nor is it just, to drive off the pack that has killed the stag and feed your own pack upon it." "Oh, I am so sorry," said Pwyll. I did not know that these dogs belonged to someone. I thought they were just a wild pack." "No, they are my dogs," said the other rider. And Pwyll said, "I am so very sorry. I am Pwyll, the Prince of Dyfed, and I will do whatever I can to make things right. How can I make things right?" The other rider said, "Well, I am Arawn, the Prince of Annwfn, and I think I have an idea of how you can make things right, Pwyll." Pwyll said, "I will do whatever needs to be done." "Ah, then," said Arawn, "there is a man, another prince of Arawn, who keeps telling me that my territory is his, and he continually fights with me about everything, and it would be much easier if I were the only prince in Annwfn, then I could be the king, and this other man, Havgan, would not be around anymore. That would be much easier for me." Well, Pwyll said, "Well, I do not know how I can fix the problem." "Oh, but I do," said Arawn, "for you see, I am to meet Havgan 1 year from tonight, and we are to joust. And I know that I cannot beat him, for we are equally matched, Havgan and I, and as we both have a little bit of magic, he will be guarding against everything that I could do. But you, Prince of Dyfed, you could beat him. What you must do, though, you must only strike him once. It does not matter if he asks you to strike him again. Do not do it. Only strike him once. For if you strike him again, then he will be able to get up. And his magic will make it so that he can heal himself and he will come back to fight me again. But if you strike him just once, then he will not be able to rise. And I will become the king of Annwfn, and all of the troubles of my people will be over." "Well," said Pwyll, "I would gladly do that for you, but I am a little concerned, for if you are to fight this Havgan, then how am I to go in your stead?" And Arawn said, "Oh, do not worry about that. As I said, I have a little magic. And so I will make it so that you look like me and I look like you. You will go today to my kingdom and you will live there as me for a year and a day. And you will fight this Havgan and you will defeat him. You will have wonderful clothing and wonderful food, and much entertainment. My wife is very beautiful. She will entertain you grandly, and everyone will think you are me. And then I will make myself look like you, and I will go back to your country of Dyfed, and I will rule your country for you for a year and a day. And 1 year and 1 day from today, a year from tomorrow, we will meet back here, and then we shall see what has happened." "Well," said Pwyll, "I suppose if I go to your country now, and I watch carefully and see what goes on around me, I will learn the customs of your land, and then, yes, I should be able to fight this Havgan 1 year from tonight, and then 1 year from tomorrow we will meet again here, and we will see what has happened." "Very well," said Pwyll. And together he and Arawn went back until Pwyll can see in the distance the towers and the the spires and the walls of Arawn's country. And he said, there is the capital of my country of Annwfn. Go forth, Arawn. Go forth, Arawn, and take your place in my kingdom. Well, Pwyll did. He went forward, and he got to the wall of the castle, and they lowered the gates, and the men came tumbling out to meet him. My lord, we lost you in the hunt. Ah, all is well, said Pwyll. And they all greeted him, and they took him in to change out of his hunting clothes into his feasting clothes. And then they went into the feasting hall, and it was the most beautiful castle Pwyll had ever seen. All of the rooms were very beautifully, tastefully decorated, and they had wonderful, comfortable furniture in them. There were beautiful tapestries on the walls. But when he came into the great feasting hall, then he saw something even better. For all of the people came in, and they were all dressed in the most beautiful, rich clothing. And then coming towards him, dressed in a gold brocaded gown, was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. And she greeted him as her husband, and she sat beside him at the feast. And there was dancing and laughing and singing and entertainment and so much food. And when the supper was over, then Pwyll, as Arawn, and the wife of Arawn went into the bedroom together. And it was very odd, for although Pwyll had given her a kiss upon the cheek when she had greeted him, and had sat very kindly with her at the table and talked to her and listened to her, and they had had a very good conversation, as soon as they went into the bedroom, he said nothing to her. He turned his back upon her. He dressed himself behind the screen, and then he climbed into bed, and he laid facing the wall without looking at her all night long. Well, Arawn's wife thought that was very odd behavior for a husband. Usually there's at least a kiss and a hug before you go to bed at night, even if you're tired. But perhaps he was just very, very tired. And so the next day they got up, and they had some government business to do, and they had some other feast, and they had some more dancing and more singing. And Arawn's wife thought that her husband was attentive enough during the day. He kissed her on the cheek. He told her he loved her. He touched her hand. He gave her little hugs, things like that. But again, that night, when they went to bed, as soon as they went into their room, he went behind the screen to change into his sleeping clothes. He did not look at her all night long. He climbed into the bed, and he turned his face to the wall, and he never hugged or kissed her goodnight. And that continued for an entire year. Now, during that entire year, Pwyll learned a good deal about little things he could do in his own kingdom to rule them a little bit better, for they were already set up in Arawn's kingdom of Annwfn. And he went on hunts with the people of Annwfn, and he went to dances, and he went to feasting, and they had tournaments and all sorts of wonderful things. But when the year was up, and the day came for the confrontation with Havgan, Pwyll mounted Arawn's horse, and he was dressed all in Arawn's armor, and they went out to the battlefield where they were to meet near the ford. And one of the men stood up, and he said, "Now, my lords," for of course many of Arawn's people and many of Havgan's lords had come with them to see the fight. "My lords, this fight is between this man, Arawn, Prince of Annwfn, and this man, Havgan, Prince of Annwfn. This fight is between the two of them alone. Let no man interfere, and let no other man fight. My lords, can you be reconciled?" And both Pwyll and Havgan said no. And so the herald stood back and said, "Well then, commence the fight." And so Pwyll set his lance in readiness, and he set spurs to Arawn's horse, and off he galloped. And Havgan set his lance in readiness and set spurs to his horse, and off he galloped. And they galloped towards each other. And when they met, Arawn, or Pwyll, who looked like Arawn, set his lance in just a way so that it hit Havgan right in the middle of the shield, and it shattered his shield. The blow was so strong, and in fact, it went straight through and into Havgan's armor, and it broke his armor, and Havgan fell right back over the back of his horse and onto the ground. And he said, "Oh, Prince Arawn, how could you do such a thing to me? You have killed me. I will die of this wound. I pray you, do not let me die slowly. Kill me now, strike me again." But Pwyll remembered what Arawn had told him the year before, and he knew that if he struck Havgan again, Havgan's magic would allow him to heal himself. And so he said, "No, I do not think so. I have struck once, and once is all I will strike." And then Havgan looked to the lords who had come with him, and he said, "My lords, I can no longer rule you, for I am wounded, and I will die. You must pick a new lord over you and a new ruler." And Pwyll turned to Arawn's men, and he said, "My lords, I have won the battle. Therefore, find out who owes me allegiance, and let us take care of this so that this day can be over." Well, they found that all of Havgan's men owed allegiance to Arawn now, and so they all paid allegiance to him, and they said they would follow him from then on. And so they declared him Arawn, King of Annwfn. And Pwyll went back to Arawn's house, and the next day he declared that he would go for a hunt. And as he went out, he rode out after the hounds, and he let himself slip away from the rest of the group, and he went out to Glen Cwch to meet Arawn come back. And when he rode into the clearing in Glen Cwch, he found Arawn already there waiting for him. And he said, "Well, my lord, it is done." "Aye, it is done," said Arawn, "for I have heard of it, and it is well done. I thank you much, my friend. Now, you will find when you go home that I've made a few changes to the way you were ruling. I hope you do not mind, and I hope you will keep them up, for I think they would be good changes." And Pwyll said, "Well, I have learned much from the way that you ruled your kingdom, so I am certain they will be good." And Pwyll went on his way home. Now Arawn went to his own home, and when he arrived, he greeted his wife joyfully, and he greeted all of his men with joy, and he was so glad to see them all, for of course it had been a year since he had seen them. But as far as they knew, he had just left that morning, and so they thought perhaps he was just in a very good mood after his riding out to the hunt. His wife, indeed, thought that he was in a very good mood, for he was far more affectionate than he had been for an entire year, kissing her and hugging her and talking to her and stroking her face or touching her hair. And when they went to bed that night, he did not walk into the room and hide behind the screen and not look at her all night. Instead, he came and he hugged her and he kissed her goodnight, and they fell asleep together in each other's arms. Well, in the middle of the night, Arawn's wife woke up, and she began to think about this strange change in her husband. And she was thinking about it so hard that she did not hear that Arawn had also woken up. And he said something to her, but she did not hear him. And he spoke to her again, and she still didn't hear him. And when he spoke to her again, finally she heard him, and she said, "Oh, I'm sorry. Were you saying something, my dear?" And he said, "Well, what on earth has you so buried in your thoughts that you didn't hear me talking to you? Silly woman." "Well," she said, "I was just thinking about how very affectionate you are tonight." Well, of course I'm affectionate. I'm always affectionate. No, you haven't been. Not for the last year. For the last year, you haven't looked at me or given me any hugs or kisses once we go to bed at night. Oh, said Around, really? Well, suddenly Around realized that Powart was a very, very good friend, for he had not tried to be a husband to Around's wife, even though he could have. And so Around said, I tell you what, I need to explain that behavior to you. And then he told her all about how he had met Powart in the woods. And then Powart had exchanged places with him and fought the battle with Havgan so that he could now be the king of Annwfn. And Around's wife said, I think you have found a very good friend in that man. I think so too, said Around. And I think in the morning I will send him a gift or two in thanks. Now Powart, he had gone home, and he had begun to ask his lords and his ladies if he had been ruling well for the last year, and they told him that he had been the best ruler for the last year. Not that he wasn't good before, but there had just been something extra for the last year. He had been free, giving out what he had gotten in monies to help the people who needed it, and he had been a good ruler and had made good rules and good laws. And then Powart said to them, let me tell you, I think I should tell you so that you can give thanks to the man who really has been ruling you for the last year. And then he told them all about what had happened when he had gotten lost on that hunt a year before. And they said to him, oh, my lord, are you going to change all of the rules that you put into place? And he said, no, 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 I'm going to keep them all. And in fact, I might change a few more. And they thought that was quite good. And so the friendship between Powart, Prince of Dyfed, and Around, King of Annwfn, was strong and grew stronger. They sent gifts back and forth, and they visited back and forth. And in fact, the story spread far and wide, and before too long, rather than calling Pwyll the Prince of Dyfed, they began to call him Pwyll Pen Annwfn, which means Pwyll, the head of Annwfn. And that is the story of Pwyll Pen Annwfn from Wales. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you'll come back and join us again next Friday at 3 p.m. Central Time, when we'll have another story for you here from the Milledgeville Public Library of Illinois. Have a great day, everybody. Bye.